Olivia Mason's garden wasn't just a patch of land, it was her sanctuary. After moving into the quiet suburb of Stonebrook Hills 5 years ago, she had poured her heart into turning her barren backyard into a lush retreat. Where others saw a chore, Olivia saw magic. Climbing roses tangled with honeysuckle on the fence, neat rows of tomatoes and peppers, clusters of native wildflowers that hummed with bees, and a small apricot tree that shaded a worn wooden bench. Every morning before the world woke up, Olivia would sip her tea beneath the tree's branches, watching the sun scatter gold across the leaves. Neighbors often paused during their walks to admire her work, offering kind words through the fence. Children would peer over to catch sight of the bright butterflies and darting lizards that made the garden their home. But not everyone admired the little paradise Olivia had created. It started with the car, a sleek black sedan that idled at the curb on a crisp spring morning. Olivia noticed it while pruning the lavender, the snip of her shears slowing as she glanced at the tinted windows. The car's engine purred quietly. Just as she turned to go inside, the window rolled down, and there he was, Mark Duval, the HOA president. Mark leaned slightly out of the window, his phone raised. A soft click. Another. He didn't wave, didn't smile. Just took his photos like she was an exhibit at a zoo. Olivia straightened and walked toward the fence. "Can I help you with something, Mark?" Mark's smile was thin and sharp. "Just documenting a few things for the association records." "Lovely garden you've got here." His tone left her uneasy. Without another word, he rolled up the window and the car glided down the street, disappearing around the corner. The incident might have seemed harmless, but something about it stayed with Olivia. That afternoon, she searched the HOA's guidelines, a thick packet she hadn't looked at since moving in. Nothing clearly prohibited vegetable gardens or native plants. In fact, there was a clause about encouraging drought-tolerant landscaping, which she thought her garden exemplified. She shook off the encounter and returned to tending her roses, deciding Mark must have been on some routine inspection. A week passed. Then came the letter. It arrived in a plain white envelope with the HOA's seal embossed on the corner. The language was cold, formal. Notice of violation, failure to maintain landscaping in compliance with community standards. Olivia read it twice, heart sinking. The letter demanded she removed unapproved vegetation and restore uniformity to the property or face escalating fines. She stared at the paper, confused. What did unapproved vegetation even mean? She had lived there for 5 years, without a word of complaint, and what uniformity? Her neighbors had cookie-cutter lawns of patchy grass and identical shrubs, sterile, lifeless spaces that seemed designed only for show. Olivia paced the kitchen, the letter trembling in her hand. That night, as the sun set and long shadows crept across her stripped wooden floors, she sat on the porch and watched the black sedan reappear at the end of the block. It lingered, its headlights off, before vanishing into the dark. Something wasn't right. Olivia felt it deep in her bones. This wasn't about the garden. Mark Duval wanted something, and she intended to find out what. Olivia didn't sleep well after the letter arrived. All night she lay awake, the shadows of tree branches outside dancing across her bedroom walls like grasping fingers. By dawn, she was determined. She wouldn't be bullied into destroying the garden she'd built with her own 2 hands. That afternoon, she gathered her documents, photos of the yard, receipts for the native plants she'd purchased, copies of the HOA's landscaping guidelines, and made her way to the monthly board meeting at the Stonebrook Hills clubhouse. The room was small and sterile, furnished with folding chairs and a long table where the board members sat in a neat row. Mark Duval occupied the center seat, flanked by 2 members Olivia barely knew, Carol Finch, who always seemed more interested in her tablet than the meeting, and George Simmons, who had a permanent scowl etched onto his face. Olivia's heart pounded as she stepped to the podium. "I received this violation notice," she began, holding up the letter. "I believe there's been some mistake. My garden is well maintained. In fact, it follows the HOA's own water-wise landscaping guidelines. I'm asking the board to reconsider this notice." Mark steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Olivia. We appreciate your concern. However, we've received multiple complaints about your property's appearance." "From who?" Olivia's voice trembled with both fear and frustration. Mark's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "The complainants preferred to remain anonymous. That's their right." Before Olivia could respond, he tapped a button on a remote, and grainy photos filled the screen behind him. They showed tangled vines, what appeared to be overgrown weeds, piles of dead brush, except Olivia knew those weren't real. The images were distorted, cropped in ways that exaggerated the wildness of certain areas while hiding the neat rows of vegetables, the trimmed pathways, the order beneath the natural growth. "That's not my garden," she said. But her voice sounded small in the cavernous silence that followed. "The board has voted," Mark said smoothly. "You'll need to bring the property into compliance within 10 days, or we'll be forced to take further action." Olivia left the meeting shaken. Outside, the night air was cool and sharp, and she paused beneath a street lamp trying to collect herself. As she reached for her keys, her phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number lit the screen. "Watch your back. This isn't about the garden." Her blood ran cold. She spun around, scanning the empty parking lot. The black sedan wasn't there, but she couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on her, watching from the shadows. The next few days passed in a blur. Olivia documented everything, photographing her yard from every angle, printing the HOA guidelines, and contacting neighbors she trusted. Many were sympathetic but reluctant to get involved. Others muttered that they'd heard of the HOA pulling stunts like this before. Then came another letter. The fines had already begun, accumulating. Daily, Olivia felt the walls closing in. But late one night, while sorting through paperwork at her kitchen table, she noticed something strange. The landscaping company mentioned in the letter, the one authorized to remediate her property if she failed to comply, shared a P.O. box address with a business link to Mark Duval's family. A chill settled over Olivia. This wasn't just about some imagined violation. Mark stood to profit from the destruction of her garden. She closed the file, her mind racing. The fight was only just beginning, and she knew now that Mark's motives ran far deeper than neighborhood aesthetics. Olivia's alarm clock read 5:43 a.m. when she was jolted awake by the rumble of heavy engines. At first, she thought it was a garbage truck, until the unmistakable crack of splintering wood made her bolt upright. Throwing on a jacket, she raced out the back door, heart pounding. Her breath caught at the sight before her. 2 trucks, a backhoe, and a team of workers already deep in the process of tearing apart her garden. The apricot tree, the heart of the yard, lay on its side, its roots exposed like torn sinew. "Stop!" Olivia's voice rang out, but the machines drowned her out. She ran toward the nearest worker, a man with a hard hat and reflective vest. "You can't do this. This is my property." The man barely spared her a glance. "Orders from the HOA, we're authorized. You can take it up with them." Olivia's eyes darted to the paper he handed her. It bore the HOA seal and Mark Duval's signature. Immediate remediation order. No prior notice. No chance to appeal. Just destruction, swift and brutal. Mark stood at the edge of the yard, arms crossed, his expression smug. Olivia stormed toward him. "How dare you? This is illegal. I didn't even have time to comply with your bogus demands." He raised a brow, unbothered. "Ms. Mason, the board determined your property posed a risk to community standards. We're simply following protocol." "Protocol?" she hissed. "You're destroying my home for profit." Mark's smile was thin as ice. "Careful, Olivia, that's a serious accusation. If you interfere with authorized work, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement." The threat hung heavy in the morning air. Olivia clenched her fists, trembling with rage. Neighbors had begun to gather, drawn by the noise. Some filmed with their phones, others watched in silent horror. Yet no one stepped in fear of crossing. The HOA kept them rooted in place. With every pass of the machines, years of Olivia's labor were erased. The vegetable beds were reduced to muddy trenches. The flower borders were crushed beneath tires. Even the bee-friendly wildflowers, planted with such care to attract pollinators, were churned into the soil by noon. Nothing remained but bare dirt, splintered wood, and Olivia's shattered spirit. The trucks pulled away, leaving deep scars in the earth. Mark approached her one last time. "We'll be sending you the invoice for today's work. And any further non-compliance will escalate fines." Then he turned on his heel, striding to his car as if he hadn't just overseen the razing of someone's dream. Olivia sank to her knees in the dirt, too stunned to cry. The garden she'd nurtured was gone. But as she stared at the wreckage, something shifted inside her. The shock began to harden into resolve. She wiped her hands on her jeans and stood. Enough was enough. That night, Olivia stayed up, combing through records, driven by a fire she hadn't known she possessed. She mapped connections, the landscaping company contracted by the HOA, its ownership linked to Mark's brother-in-law. the suspiciously timed contract approvals, the pattern of similar remediation orders issued to other homeowners whose lots bordered common areas the HOA had been eyeing for. Redevelopment. This was no coincidence. Olivia printed every document, saved every email, and began assembling a file. If Mark thought she'd roll over and take this, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. And as she worked, a plan began to form, one that would not only expose the corruption, but make sure no one in Stonebrook Hills would ever be bullied by their HOA again. The day after the destruction of her garden, Olivia barely recognized her own home. The backyard, once vibrant and alive, looked like a battlefield scarred by war. Yet, amidst the wreckage, Olivia found something new, a fierce determination to uncover the truth. She began by digging through the HOA's public records online. At first glance, everything seemed routine: annual budgets, meeting minutes, vendor contracts. But as she sifted through pages, Olivia noticed subtle inconsistencies. Some meeting minutes were missing entirely, while others contained vague wording that didn't match what residents recalled from previous meetings. Late into the night, she cross-referenced contracts the HOA had signed with landscaping companies. One name popped up repeatedly: Greenscape Solutions. What struck Olivia as odd was that Greenscape's listed address was a small mailbox in a nearby town. The same mailbox tied to a business registered under the name of Mark Duval's brother-in-law. The deeper she dug, the more tangled the web became. Several homeowners, all with properties adjacent to community common areas or prized lots, had been hit with similar violation notices, only to have their landscaping remediated by the same company. Olivia's mind raced. Mark and his family were profiting from the destruction of these yards, then likely reselling or leasing the cleared lots for a developer's project. That had been quietly circulating rumors in the neighborhood for months. Just as she compiled her findings into a neat folder, the sharp buzz of her phone startled her. A message flashed on the screen. No number, just 3 words. "Stop digging, Olivia." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Was this a prank? A warning? She looked over her shoulder, her eyes catching the shadowed shapes of trees swaying gently in the breeze. No one was there. The next morning, Olivia found something placed on her front porch: a dead rosebush, its petals wilted and brown, wrapped in black plastic. No note, no signature, just a silent threat. Instead of scaring her off, the gesture steeled her resolve. She took photos of the bush and texted them to her attorney friend, Marcus, who had helped her understand property laws years before. Marcus responded quickly: "They're trying to intimidate you. Keep records of everything. Don't engage directly with whoever is behind this. I'll help you prepare a case." Encouraged by Marcus's support, Olivia started reaching out to neighbors she trusted. At first, many were hesitant, afraid of retaliation, fines, or worse. But a few quietly admitted they had similar run-ins with the HOA, sharing stories of fines and threats over trivial or fabricated violations. One neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, whispered, "Mark's been pushing to clear properties near the east side. Rumor is, a big developer wants to build something there. He's using the HOA to make it happen." Olivia felt the pieces click together. This wasn't about maintaining community standards or uniformity. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme to profit at the expense of homeowners' rights and livelihoods. With new allies gathering, Olivia's fight was no longer just personal, it was becoming a battle for the entire neighborhood. That evening, as she reviewed her documents and planned next steps, a low noise at the back door made her freeze. Footsteps. She grabbed her phone and tiptoed to the window, heart hammering. No one was there, only a faint rustling sound among the bushes. A note fluttered onto the porch in the wind, catching on a flower pot. Olivia's hands trembled as she retrieved it. The message was chilling. "Walk carefully. This is bigger than you think." The garden may have been destroyed, but Olivia's fight had just begun, and now, the stakes were higher than ever. Olivia sat at her kitchen table, the flickering glow of her laptop screen illuminating her determined face. The threats had only deepened her resolve. She wasn't going to back down, not when the stakes were this high. She drafted an email to a local investigative journalist she'd heard about on a neighborhood forum, someone known for exposing corruption and shady dealings. She attached her files, contracts, photos, letters, and everything she had uncovered so far. "Please help," she wrote. "This is bigger than just my garden. The HOA president is profiting from destroying homeowners' yards to push a development project through. I believe others are affected too. I need the truth out." Days passed with no reply. The silence gnawed at her. Was she too late? Too small to matter? Then one evening, a message popped up in her inbox. The journalist, Rachel Kim, wanted to meet. Their meeting took place at a small, discreet cafe on the edge of town. Rachel was sharp-eyed and brisk, her voice low but confident as Olivia explained the situation. Rachel's fingers flew across her phone, cross-referencing details in real time. This isn't just a local HOA issue, Rachel said quietly. There's been chatter about similar schemes across the state. Boards abusing their power to force out residents and line their pockets. If we expose this, it could trigger a statewide investigation. Olivia felt a spark of hope. She wasn't alone. Back home, Olivia reached out to a few neighbors again, asking if they'd be willing to share their stories on record. Slowly, brave voices emerged from the shadows. Mrs. Alvarez showed photos of her backyard fence, mysteriously cut down. Mr. Patel spoke about fines piling up for alleged unauthorized plantings. Each story painted a picture of intimidation and greed. But not everyone wanted to fight. Some neighbors warned Olivia to be careful, fearing the HOA's retaliation. One evening, her car tires were slashed, leaving her stranded in the dark. The police shrugged it off as vandalism, but Olivia knew it was a warning. Still, the support she gained pushed her forward. Marcus, her attorney friend, helped her draft formal complaints and legal notices challenging the HOA's actions. He warned her that fighting an HOA was like battling a well-oiled machine. But Olivia's courage and evidence made him hopeful. Meanwhile, Olivia's relationship with Mark Duval grew colder. At HOA meetings, his gaze bore into her like a silent threat. He began spreading rumors, painting her as a troublemaker and a difficult neighbor. But Olivia had a secret weapon. Rachel's investigation was gaining momentum. An article was in the works, and whispers of a class action lawsuit began circulating quietly among the residents. One late night, Olivia's phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from an anonymous number. Meet me at the park bench, behind the community center, midnight, come alone. Her heart pounded as she debated what to do. Was it a trap? A chance for a key ally? Determined to uncover every piece of the puzzle, Olivia decided to go. Knowing that the next move could change everything, Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears as she slipped out of her house just before midnight. The quiet streets of hills were cloaked in shadows, the only illumination coming from a flickering street lamp near the community center. She kept her phone in one hand, ready to call for help if needed, and approached the old wooden bench where the message had directed. Her breath formed misty clouds in the cold night air. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind the bushes. A man in his late 40s, wearing a worn jacket and a wary expression. He glanced around nervously before speaking in a hushed voice. You're Olivia, right? She nodded, heart pounding. Who are you? My name's Tom. I used to be on the HOA board. Olivia's eyes widened. Why didn't you say anything before? Tom sighed deeply. I wanted to, but Mark, he's ruthless. He runs the board like his personal business. Anyone who challenges him gets pushed out, or worse. He paused, looking around as if expecting someone to appear. I've been watching what happened to your garden. It's not the first time this has happened, and it won't be the last unless someone stops them. I left the board last year after I refused to approve one of Mark's shady contracts with that landscaping company. Olivia's mind raced. Here was a chance to get insider information, proof that could expose the entire operation. Do you have documents? Evidence? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Tom nodded and pulled a crumpled envelope from his jacket pocket. I managed to take some records before I left. Contracts, emails, financial statements, all linking Mark and his family to the companies profiting from these demolitions. Olivia carefully took the envelope, her fingers trembling. Thank you, Tom. This could change everything. Tom looked around one last time, his face grim. Be careful, Olivia. They watch everyone closely now. You're in deeper than you think. Before she could respond, a sudden noise, a twig snapping nearby, sent them both into alert mode. Olivia gripped the envelope tighter. Go, I'll cover you, Tom whispered, disappearing back into the darkness. Olivia hurried back home, adrenaline surging. As she entered her living room, she locked the door behind her and laid out the papers on the table. The evidence was damning. Forged signatures, fake bids from shell companies, invoices for work never done. Mark Duval had been orchestrating a scheme to evict homeowners by any means necessary, profiting through the destruction of private property. The weight of the discovery hit Olivia hard. This wasn't just about her anymore, it was about justice for everyone Mark had wronged. She contacted Rachel Kim immediately, sending photos of the documents and asking for help to verify and prepare the evidence for public release. Rachel responded with urgency, arranging a meeting the very next day. As Olivia prepared for the confrontation ahead, she felt a mix of fear and hope. She wasn't just fighting for her garden now, she was fighting for the soul of Stonebrook Hills. But, even as she planned her next steps, a shadow lurked beyond the window, watching and waiting. The morning sun cast long shadows over Stonebrook Hills as Olivia made her way to the cafe where she was set to meet Rachel Kim. The weight of the stolen documents felt heavy in her bag, a physical reminder of the battle ahead. Inside the bustling cafe, Rachel greeted her with a firm handshake and a knowing smile. "This is bigger than I imagined," Rachel said, spreading out the papers between them. "We have everything to bring Mark and his cronies down." Olivia nodded, though nerves twisted in her stomach. "What's the plan?" Rachel tapped her phone. "We'll publish the story tonight. Simultaneously, I've contacted a local law firm that specializes in HOA abuses. They're ready to help the residents file a class action lawsuit." As they strategized, Olivia's phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "Drop it now, or face the consequences." Rachel's face hardened. "They're scared." Good. The hours dragged as Olivia prepared for the inevitable fallout. She notified neighbors, many of whom expressed fear but also a flicker of hope. A community meeting was scheduled for the evening, the same night the article would go live. That night, the online expos exploded across social media. Local news picked it up, and the community center was packed. Faces filled with anxiety and anger gathered to hear Olivia speak. "I stood by while they destroyed my garden," Olivia began, voice steady but passionate. "But this is not just my fight, it's ours. Mark Duval and his associates have been exploiting the HOA, profiting from our loss, and silencing dissent." As murmurs of agreement grew louder, the doors suddenly swung open. Mark Duval entered, flanked by two men in suits. His confident smirk was gone, replaced by a cold glare. "This meeting is adjourned," he announced, voice sharp. "You have no proof. You're wasting your time." Olivia held up the documents. "Proof is right here, and it's going public." The room erupted. Some called for calm. Others shouted accusations. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Suddenly, police officers appeared at the entrance. They carried a warrant, a result of Rachel's investigation and the mounting evidence. Mark's facade cracked. He was led away, handcuffed, while residents watched in stunned silence as the dust settled. Olivia looked around at her neighbors, once silenced by fear, now emboldened by truth. Her garden might have been destroyed, but her fight had restored the community's spirit and reclaimed their rights. Just as she thought the nightmare was over, her phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. "This isn't the end, they're coming back." Olivia's eyes narrowed. The battle for Stonebrook Hills was far from over. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with anticipation. Months had passed since Mark Duval's arrest, but the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. Olivia sat beside her attorney, Marcus, watching as the judge prepared to hear the final arguments in the class action lawsuit against the HOA and its corrupt leadership. The community had rallied, shedding their fear and reclaiming their voices. The story Rachel Kim broke had ignited a fire across the state, inspiring homeowners everywhere to stand up against similar abuses. But tonight, Olivia felt a strange unease, like something hidden beneath the surface was waiting to unravel everything they'd fought for. As the defense lawyer began his statement, a sudden commotion erupted near the courtroom entrance. A figure slipped inside unnoticed, a man Olivia had never seen before. Yet his presence sent a cold chill down her spine. The stranger approached the judge's bench and handed over an envelope. The judge glanced at it, then motioned for a recess. Olivia's heart pounded as whispers spread through the courtroom. What could be in that envelope? Outside, Marcus pulled her aside. "This changes everything," he said grimly. "There's new evidence, something that ties even higher powers to the scheme." Curiosity and dread gnawed at Olivia. The fight had been against Mark Duval and his immediate circle, but now it seemed a far deeper corruption was at play. Later, that night, Olivia sat alone in her living room, the city lights flickering beyond the window. Her phone buzzed, a message from Rachel. "We need to talk. Urgent, come to the cafe at dawn." When Olivia arrived, Rachel looked exhausted but determined. She slid a file across the table. "This isn't just local corruption," Rachel explained. These documents show a network of investors and developers linked to state officials. Mark was just the front man. Olivia's mind reeled. The destruction of her garden was a piece of a much larger puzzle, a scheme that stretched far beyond Stonebrook Hills. "What do we do now?" Olivia asked. Rachel smiled faintly. "We keep fighting, but this time we do it smarter. We build a coalition. We expose the whole network." As dawn broke, Olivia felt a renewed strength. The battle had taken twists she never imagined, but she wasn't alone anymore. The community was awake, the truth was out, and the fight for justice had only just begun. Her garden might have been lost, but from its ruins grew something stronger: hope, unity, and the courage to face whatever came next. And deep beneath the calm streets of Stonebrook Hills, the story was far from over.